Good evening, everyone. This is Wayne over at the Alchemical Tech Revolution YouTube channel. Tonight, we're going to be looking at a little book called Mystic Masonry, The Symbols of Freemasonry and the Greater Mysteries of Antiquity by J.D. Buck, M.D., 1911, Indo-American Book Company, Chicago, Illinois. Tonight, we're going to go through this book, and we're going to go specifically into Chapter 4, a section called The Secret Doctrine. And we're going to explore a lot of different ideas in here tonight that are kind of stunning and will give you the true intentions behind the Masonic fraternity and the other secret brotherhoods that they interconnect with. And you'll see here as we go on how a lot of these things tie together. And we'll also see some stunning admissions in this writing. This was originally intended just for Masons only, and, as many of you know, in days past, you couldn't get a hold of these unless you were a Mason yourself in good standing or had access to a Freemasonic library. So many of these things have come out on the internet since then, and that's a wonderful thing. We could use the internet as a great tool to find a lot of these older writings. And, we could see many of the foundations that our modern society was built upon by doing this, and we could see what it is that these people who are in these secret societies, who have been covertly steering things for many, many hundreds of years now, we could see what it is that they really believe and what they're really working towards. So let's get started here without further ado. Chapter 4, The Secret Doctrine. The true Mason is a practical philosopher who, under religious emblems in all ages adopted by wisdom, builds upon plans traced by nature and reason the moral edifice of knowledge. As Grand Master of all symbolic lodges, it is your especial duty to aid in restoring Masonry to its primitive purity. Among all the ancient nations, there was one faith and one idea of deity for the enlightened, intelligent, and educated, and another for the common people. I'm going to pause right there, folks. Did you hear that? Among all the ancient nations, there was one faith and one idea of deity for the enlightened, intelligent, and educated, and another for the common people. See, they're making that division and distinction there. These are, the secret brotherhood. They view only one idea of who or what God is, one idea of deity that the enlightened and intelligent and educated see, and there's a different view for the common people. So they're basically saying, we have this secret knowledge, and this is what we believe, and this is what we follow, and this is who or what we perceive to be God, and it's different from what the external trappings of it are. So let's continue on there. To this rule, the Hebrews were no exception. It, in parentheses it says Masonry, is philosophical because it teaches the great truths concerning the nature and existence of one supreme deity, and the existence and immortality of the soul. The universe, which is the uttered word of God, is infinite in extent. There is no empty space beyond creation on any side. The universe, which is the thought of God pronounced, never was not since God never was inert. I myself never was not, nor thou, nor all the princes of the earth, nor shall we ever hereafter cease to be. Everything emanates from a single principle and a primitive love, which is the moving power of all and governs all. Masonry teaches and has preserved in its purity the cardinal tenets of the old primitive faith, which underlie and are the foundation of all religions. There is no fact in history more easily and completely demonstrable than the existence of the secret doctrine in all ages among all people, and of adepts or masters who were familiar with its teachings and were more or less capable of expounding its principles. It is equally demonstrable that the secret doctrine was the real foundation of every great religion known to man, that only the initiated priest or hierophant knew the real doctrines in any case, and only these, as a rule, in the earliest history of each religion. Gonna pause there again, folks. Do you hear that? They're claiming that this secret doctrine is the underlying truth behind, quote unquote, all religions and all religious ideas known to man. Okay, and that only the initiated priest or hierophant knew the real doctrines, and that what they taught the people or externally was completely different from what the real doctrines were. So what does this tell you? This should tell you that our religious systems are meant to be control systems, because at the topmost places in those religions, they're withholding either secret knowledge to control people, or they're just deliberately misleading people to control people. So religions, organized religions of all sorts, are a control system. Now, whether these claims are true or not, that this quote-unquote secret doctrine is the basis for all religions, who could say for sure? I don't know if there's any evidence that could really support that. Now, they do say that the evidence backs it up, that there was this secret doctrine that was prevalent throughout all ages and times behind these religious orders. And that may be true for the topmost levels of the religious orders, but in my view, that doesn't negate the existence of God or how we perceive God. This is just basically these people with their system, their control system, taking things over and trying to replace a creator being with something artificial in order to entice the masses to do what they please. So whether or not they truly have any kind of secret knowledge or secret doctrine behind the scenes that they know and that the masses in general do not know, that's debatable. And, we will see as we go on that there are certain things that hold true. And like everything else, they mix a lot of truths in with, many of the perversions that they have here of religious systems and these different ideas and philosophies. So we could see just the hubris in these statements. They're saying that this secret doctrine is the truth behind all religious experience. And in my view, that's not really something that's either provable or disprovable. So it's just hearsay on their part. They're the ones claiming, it was us behind the scenes. We're the ones that set up all these great religious ideas. It was our brotherhood, our priestcraft that set all this up and put this stuff in place. So you could see, is that a true thing? Are there, those within the priestcraft that have steered things and guided society along through the ages? Oh, I would say certainly there were. But was this the real inspiration behind, quote-unquote, all religions? That I'm not sure of. But let's read on and see what else they have to say. Furthermore, the sacred books of all religions, including those of the Jews and the Christians, were and are no more than parables and allegories of the real secret doctrine, transcribed for the ignorant and superstitious masses. All commentaries written on these sacred books, whether on those of Moses, the Psalms and the prophets of Judaism, the Gospels of the Gnostics and the Christians, or those written on the sacred books of the East, the Vedas, Puranas, and Upanishads, all either make confusion more confounded when written by one ignorant of the secret doctrine, or when written by initiates, but ring the changes on, or further elaborate the parables and allegories. It is furthermore easily demonstrable that the secret doctrine came originally from the Far East, and is the primitive wisdom religion. Its earlier records are now found in India and Tibet. Thence it seems to have traveled to Ethiopia, thence to Egypt and Chaldea. This route or order of transmission, however, is not to be easily ascertained with accuracy, nor is it a matter of any consequence to us at the present time. I'm going to pause right there, folks. Now, listen to what this author's telling you. He said it's easily demonstrable that this secret doctrine came from the East, in the form of the primitive wisdom religion. And then he goes on to name the path that it came, that they found records in India, Tibet, Egypt, Chaldea, all the way across. And this route, or the order of transmission, however, is not a matter of any consequence to us at this present time, and it is not to be easily ascertained with accuracy. So he's making this claim unfounded. He's saying it could be easily demonstrated that this stuff came from the East. However, It can't really be easily ascertained with accuracy that this is how it came or where it came from. So you see the doublespeak there right out of the gate. Okay, this is just in order to obfuscate information more. Either that, or they're just claiming this without any evidence of it, and that you have to be skeptical of that right there. But anyway, let's continue on. It is everywhere and at all times essentially the same. Only the outer gloss, the parables and allegories concealing it, differ among different people. Underlying this secret doctrine was a profound philosophy of the creation or evolution of worlds and of man. The present humanity, in many quarters of the globe, has evolved on the intellectual plane so far that there now exist a very large number of persons capable of apprehending this old philosophy and, at the same time, capable of understanding the responsibility incurred in misusing or misinterpreting it. A large number of persons have reached, on the intellectual plane, the state of manhood and are capable of partaking of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. There is therefore no reason why this old philosophy should be longer concealed. On the other hand, there are reasons why it should be known. Empirical knowledge has advanced in certain directions into the realm of psychism. I want you to pay attention to that word, folks. Psychism. And the arts, anciently designated by the term magic. And it is imperative that the dangers that attend these pursuits should be pointed out and demonstrated in order that they may be avoided by the beneficent, and that the ignorant or innocent may be afforded protection. How far these modern inroads into occultism or ancient magic extended, very few persons seem to realize. I'm going to pause right there again, folks. You hear what he's talking about here? He's talking about partaking of the fruit of the tree of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay, he starts there, and then he goes on to talk about this term that they call psychism. Okay, and they equate it to magic, the old term magic, and it says here that it's imperative that the dangers that attend these pursuits should be pointed out and demonstrated in order that they may be avoided by the beneficent. So he's saying it's okay for these master masons or whatever, however it is they view themselves, these of the highest orders, it's okay for them to utilize these approaches or these ideas as a demonstration to others why they should not, because if you don't know what you're doing exactly with it, it's very dangerous. You see that? So they're trying to say here it's okay for us to know these principles and what lies behind these principles, but it's not okay for the uninitiated. And just earlier, just a paragraph ago, he was talking about how this stuff should be brought out into the open because there's large numbers of people that have evolved enough on the intellectual plane to understand these things now. So he's kind of contradicting himself here. In one breath, he's saying we need to make this stuff public, but in the other breath, he's saying there's still need for this secrecy because of the danger involved with it. And he begins talking again about magic and occultism. So let's continue on here. It is therefore high time that the philosophy of the East should illumine the science of the West, and thus give the death blow to that intellectual diabolism and spiritual nihilism known as materialism, and that this only the secret doctrine can accomplish. Going to pause there again, folks. So he's talking about how these philosophies that he claims come from the East, and yeah, I mean, there is some truth to that. We find these philosophies in the East, but nobody knows their true origins. But he's claiming that they know the route that it came, but they can't really prove that it came from that route. And then he goes on to say that these philosophies from the East need to illumine our modern science. So you see what they're doing here. This is where this has all begun. This is where you begin to see the pairing of these old quote-unquote magical ideas with the science. It's a type of an alchemical merger between the ancient magical ideas and our modern science. So you can see how they're trying to fuse them together. Okay, and this is where everything starts to go south in our society, where science becomes replaced with scientism. Because you see, what they began to do is they tried to begin to merge these philosophical, magical principles with what they would consider the material sciences. And they do that ostensibly here, he's saying, to do away with quote-unquote materialism. But what they have indeed done is they've twisted this to an extreme, and they've gone the realm of hypermaterialism with it. So that's what they're doing. They've perverted this idea and twisted it into creating a hyper-materialist viewpoint. So they use these principles and these ideas that they call quote-unquote psychism, that they equate to the ancient magics, and they use it in pairing with our modern science to actually do the opposite of what they say here. And you'll see that in so much of their writings. What they're saying and what they're doing are complete opposites. So we can see here that that's what he's talking about. He says about materialism. Only the secret doctrine can accomplish getting rid of materialism. You see that? And that's what he's saying here. Let's continue on with the reading. Grave responsibility, however, is incurred by such a revelation. Those who, like the professional hypnotists and the vivisectionists, have sinned, perhaps ignorantly, and thus have been unconsciously black magicians, in quotation marks it says there, will eventually find no avenue of escape. Ignorance can no longer cover the inhuman or cruel practices. They're inhuman or cruel practices. So they're calling, I'm going to pause here again. This is my little aside here. He's calling professional hypnotists and vivisectionists, he says they have ignorantly sinned and are unconsciously black magicians, and that they'll find no avenue of escape. And it says here, ignorance can no longer cover their inhuman or cruel practices. So what he's saying here is many people have fallen into this trap of the hyper-materialist science view with these different archetypal ideas behind it. So this would be people like, I would roughly estimate that this would speak to people such as maybe the Huxley brothers, or perhaps Edward Bernays, people involved with social engineering on a massive level. These type of people are practitioners of black magic, according to this, because even though they unconsciously do it, their intention is not necessarily to do evil with it. But what they've done is they've become black magicians by using these principles to push forward their science ideas, or the sciences with these ideas backing them, these philosophies backing them. So, I mean, this was written before any of those people really came to much of prominence, but this is the type of people that I think that this speaks of. The people who have largely steered a lot of different things and agendas in the world, who have used this social engineering technology to steer the masses in the direction they want. These are your black magicians. Now, whether they do that, out of ignorance, which it claims here, it still says they can no longer cover their inhuman or cruel practices. And we could see that coming to fruition right now. So you could see how this does put some true ideas into the mix here. But you'll see how they twist it and turn it here later again, too. So, anyway, let's get back to this. The hypnotist cannot reduce the mind of a trusting but ignorant brother to the condition of imbecility without facing the law that counts such a crime as no less than murder. The new science resulting from the union to which I have referred, and which I believe Mr. J. M. Rusk proposes to call quote-unquote psychophysics, listen to that word, folks, psychophysics, will be well understood before the close of the 20th century, and many an old score in the intellectual arena will be settled. I'm going to pause right there. Psychophysics. This is speaking of psychology, social engineering, behavioral modification, these type things. Psychophysics. Okay? Listen to that again. Psychophysics. This is what the guy was talking about. And is this really well understood at the close of the 20th century? Well, I know that they've made a lot of strides in, psychology and that type of study. But, I mean, this is something totally different. I mean, you're looking at a cybernetic view of psychology right here, a control system view. This is what it's about. This is behavior modification. This is social engineering. That's what this is talking about. Psychophysics would be considered social engineering. Let's continue on. I don't want to babble too much here. They know little of the forces at work or the principles involved who imagine that there is sufficient force in dissolving creeds or in the dying throes of materialism to greatly retard the progress of these truths by sneers or ridicule, or to prevent their triumph by any opposition that can bring to bear against them. I'm going to pause there again. You hear that? They know little of the forces at work or the principles involved who imagine that there is sufficient force in dissolving creeds or in the dying throes of materialism to greatly retard the progress of these truths by sneers or ridicule, or to prevent their triumph by any opposition that can bring to bear against them. They have waited for millenniums and their time has come. Pause right there. You hear that? They're talking about using ridicule, sneers, all types of things against people to get them to follow what they want. This is talking directly about social engineering the masses and talking about different ways they could do that and how it is, little understood what forces are at work with this. But this is kind of where a lot of these ideas come from, is this type of thing. You see, controlling the populace goes back many, many, many thousands of years, folks. They've mastered the art of mind control. And these are the true secrets that they pass down in the secret societies. Is this kind of thing. This is social engineering on a grand scale. And it's saying now they have waited millenniums, and now their time has come. Now, mind you, this was written in 1911, so we could see the massive scale that the world has changed since then. Compared to what, the accepted history tells us beforehand. So, anyway, let's get back to the reading. I don't want to ramble on too much here. I want to get through a lot of this. To recapitulate, the secret doctrine was the universally diffused religion of the ancient and prehistoric world. Proof of its diffusion, authentic records of its history, a complete chain of documents showing its character and presence in every land, together with the teaching of all its great adepts, exist to this day in the secret crypts of libraries belonging to the occult fraternity. As to the danger of revealing these doctrines to the profane, pause right there. You and I, folks, we're the profane. We're not initiates. We're not part of the secret society. And it says down here in quotes, what the danger of revealing these doctrines to the profane would be. It says, quote, "The danger was this. Doctrines such as the planetary chain or the 7 races at once give a clue to the 7-fold nature of man. For each principle is correlated to a plane, a planet, and a race. And the human principles are, on every plane, correlated to 7-fold occult forces. Those of the highest planes being of tremendous power. No one styling himself a scholar in whatever department of exact science will be permitted to regard these teachings seriously. They will be derided and rejected a priori in this century, but only in this one. For in the 20th century of our era, scholars will begin to recognize that the secret doctrine has neither been invented nor exaggerated, but, on the contrary, simply outlined, and finally, that its teachings antedate the Vedas. And in a footnote it is said, 'This is no pretension to prophecy, but simply a statement based upon the knowledge of facts.'" End quote there. So you see what they're claiming here, okay? They're claiming that within this secret doctrine, it reveals this 7-fold nature of man and how it relates to the planetary forces and planar forces and different elements and things like that. And they're saying here that the highest planes of these being of tremendous power. So what they're doing here is they're claiming that they have knowledge of many of these types of forces, and these would be forces of nature, and how to utilize them, and that there's a lot of power involved with that. And this is the danger. This is why they don't want this secret doctrine to get out to the public, to the profane, as they would like to call us. This is why they say that that's the danger. The danger is there's tremendous power when you learn how to utilize these natural energies or forces to manifest your will. That's pretty much what they're saying here. So this is some of the things that they try to keep from the public, because it all ties back to the Hermetic ideas once again, that everything springs forth from the principle of mind, your mind. That's the thing. I mean, that's what it comes down to, the principle of mind, the Hermetic principle of mind. That's one of the things they're talking about here. This is one of the forces. You see how they say the 7 forces, or these 7-fold occult forces? That's what they're talking about. These are the 7 Hermetic principles. That's what they equate to. So if you understand those, you could have a better understanding of how our reality really works. So that's one of the things that correlates to this. Now, it does go much deeper than that, but that's overall one of the things that corresponds to what they're talking about with this 7-fold, force. Let's get back to the reading, though. I don't want to tie up too much time on that. In speaking of the source from which the present version of the secret doctrine is derived, our author says regarding an old book, in quotation marks there. And he says, so very old that our modern antiquarians might ponder over its pages in indefinite time and still not quite agree as to the nature of the fabric upon which it is written. The most ancient Hebrew document of occult learning, the Sipporah Ziniato, was compiled from it, and at a time when the former was already considered in the light of a literary relic. End quote. The days of Constantine were the last turning point in history, the period of the supreme struggle that ended in the Western world throttling the old religions in favor of the new ones built on their bodies. From thence the vista into the far distant past, beyond the deluge and the Garden of Eden, began to be forcibly and relentlessly closed by every fair and unfair means against the indiscreet gaze of posterity. Every issue was blocked up, every record that hands could be laid upon destroyed. I'm going to pause there. So they're claiming here that Constantine, the days of Constantine, were the big turning point here. So we're going back to Rome once again. You can see how all roads lead to Rome. Rome obfuscated information about the past, destroyed every record of the past. This here would actually speak to the fact that there was probably a highly advanced civilization that thrived here long before the rise of the Roman Empire, and much of the records of that have been wiped from the face of the earth. And that was done on purpose at the time of Constantine. Let's continue on. You can see how they do put some truth, in a lot of what they say here, and that's the concerning thing with a lot of this, because that's the thing people misunderstand. Not all Masons are bad. Okay, a lot of people equate Masonry with being the bad guys and being bad, and that's not necessarily the case. There's good people that get involved with Masonry too. The thing is, by the time they figure out what it is they're involved with, they're so deeply entrenched in it that they dare not speak up because of the penalties that will be incurred against them by the others in their brotherhood. And if they want any chance to try to maybe turn things around or cause some discernment to come to fruition in the public view, they kind of have to go along to get along with these people. So you could see how it gets highly convoluted at points, but there is a lot of truth written in many of their documents. I mean, they do trace back a lot of different historical things with a good deal of accuracy a lot of times, but they put their own twist on it, and that's the thing. So you will find some truth mixed with, some, with some obfuscation there. So anyway, let's get back on with the reading here. Excuse me. This same Constantine, who with his soldiers environed the bishops at the First Council of Nicaea, AD 325, and dictated terms to their deliberations, applied for initiation into the mysteries, and was told by the officiating priest that no purgation could free him from the crime of putting his wife to death, or from his many perjuries and murders. Every careful and unbiased student of history knows why this secret doctrine has been heard of so little since the days of Constantine. An exoteric religion and belief in a personal God blotted it out for self-protection, and yet, oh irony of history, the very Pentateuch conceals it, and for many a student of Kabbalah of the coming century, the seals will be broken. Okay, going to pause there, folks. He's claiming that in the coming century, for any student of Kabbalah, the seals of it will be broken. So you could see how a lot of times they put some true things in there, but then they also try to obfuscate by pointing out something like Kabbalah. Okay, now Kabbalah does carry a lot of occult information throughout, and there's a lot of different interpretations of it, but it's not the be-all end-all of this stuff. But they point it out here, just I think for the sheer purpose of obfuscating. It's important to understand some of the precepts of Kabbalah in order to look back at a lot of these different writings and stuff, though. But anyway, you're not going to get there through just Kabbalah, and that's kind of the thing that's kind of misleading here, because it's saying here that people that study Kabbalah will have the seals broken, which means they'll understand what they're looking at. But it takes more than just an understanding of the practices of Kabbalah to completely get a grip on all of this. You have to actually be multidisciplined, like have multidisciplinary reading and stuff through a lot of these different types of philosophies and different systems in order to understand and break apart this information in a lot of ways. But anyway, let's get back to the reading. In trying to apprehend an outline, at least of the secret doctrines, two ideas should be kept constantly in mind. And these ideas are space and consciousness. The former in relation to all that is either thought or asserted regarding nature and deity, and the latter in regard to deity, nature, and man. In the last analysis, both space and consciousness elude us. What they are, per se, we shall never know. We may as well take them as facts in our experience, and in analyzing that experience, both consciousness and knowledge will expand. What is it that which was, is, and will be, whether there is a universe or not, whether there be gods or none? Asks the Censar Catechism. And the answer made is space. Now, space is not nature, nor is it deity. Space may be said to contain nature or creation and to conceal divinity. It is therefore the point of emanation and the vanishing point. Going to pause right there. Let's break down this idea. It's talking about space. It's telling you what space is not. Space is not nature, nor is it deity. Okay? So it's telling you that space, this concept, space is a man-made concept. Okay? Space, there's really no demonstrable thing called space that everything exists within. Everything is in the universe. Like everything exists here, how it is. There's no space that it exists within. Like if you're trying to think of the system we live in, or think of something that exists outside of the system we live in, that would be considered space. It's a reification, okay? It's a man-made reification. It's a concept that doesn't have any basis in our reality, okay? Now, that's something that gets a little more highly philosophical there for people, and may be hard for people to wrap their brain around, but space does not exist outside of the mind. And once again, we fall back on that idea of the mind. So, in order to define what space is, it's defining here what space is not. It says space is not nature, nor is it deity. So it's not God, and it's not nature. So it's not God, and it's not our reality. So let's take a look here what else it says. says space may be said to contain nature or creation and to conceal divinity. So, when we think of space, what usually first comes to mind when somebody says space? Well, we think of outer space, don't we? That construct that they gave us that, we send rockets up to space, okay? So what is the nature of this space? It is said to contain nature, which is the earth where we live, okay? And it conceals divinity. So what is the purpose of space? This man-made idea that we invented and that our science fiction put forward and that, they claim is beyond Earth, outside of Earth. When you go up into the sky, beyond the sky that we could see, up there is in the darkness of the void beyond our atmosphere is space. Space, its sole purpose is to hide God. That's what it's there for, to conceal divinity. It says right here, space may be said to contain nature or creation and to conceal divinity. So space is the container in which our reality is contained. And it's also the thing that conceals divinity. So it could be said space is the veil that hides divinity. Okay? So it's hiding God from us. This idea of space is put there simply to hide God from us. All right? And to contain us, to keep us contained here. Let's continue on. It is therefore the point of emanation and the vanishing point. So you could see space is also a creation point. You could see this by observing magnetic fields, okay, looking at electromagnetic fields and stuff. There's a point in the center. If you do any observations of magnetic fields and stuff, that would kind of equate to a null point, okay? This is the space where it's the vanishing point, and it's also the point of emanation, because magnetic fields are toroidal in nature, and they have a corollary function within the electrical field, which is a reverse modality of that. It's kind of hard to describe without showing you a drawing, but it's an hourglass shape and a toroid shape combined together. In the middle is a null point, and that would be your point of emanation and your vanishing point. So it's kind of hard to describe, but let's not get hung up on that. But anyway, let's move on. The Occult Catechism contains the following questions and answers. What is it that ever is? Space, the eternal Anupadaka. And it says in parentheses here, I guess that means parentless. What is it that ever was? The germ in the root. What is it that is ever coming and going? The great breath. Then there are three eternals. No, the three are one. That which ever is one. That which ever was is one. That which is ever being and becoming is also one. And this is space. I'm going to pause right there, folks. Do you see what they're describing here? They're describing these three in one. They're describing the Holy Trinity, and they're equating it to space. But you see, space was put in place to conceal God from us. So it's claiming that this space, this is an alternate God. This is not Christ. This is Antichrist, an alternate Christ. Okay, space. So now do you understand why they spend so much time on this, space race and all of this nonsense, sending rockets to Mars and this and that and the other thing? Space is a type of Antichrist spirit, okay? This is the idea. They're taking the Trinity and replacing it with space here. It says, I'm going to read that again for you. This is some pretty heady stuff to get your mind around, but it's important that you understand. That which ever is one. That which ever was is one. That which is ever being and becoming is also one, and this is space. And it's talking about the germ in the root, the great breath, and the parentless. The three eternals, the three are one. See, it's giving you that Trinity idea, and then it's telling you that space is this Trinity. So do you understand where this is going? Anyway, let's continue on. Now, this is what he says here next. For clearer understanding on the part of the general reader, it must be stated that the occult science recognizes 7 cosmical elements, 4 entirely physical, and the 5th, ether, semi-material, as it will become visible in the air toward the end of the 4th round, to reign supreme over the others during the whole of the 5th. The remaining 2 are as yet absolutely beyond the range of human perception. These latter will, however, appear at presentiments during the 6th and 7th rounds respectively. These 7 elements, with their numberless sub-elements, far more numerous than those known to science, are simply conditional modifications and aspects of the one and only element. This latter is not ether, nor even akasa, but the source of these. The 5th element, now advocated quite freely by science, is not the ether hypothesized by Sir Isaac Newton, although he calls it by that name, having associated it in his mind probably with the ether, and it says in quotation marks here, father, mother, of antiquity. As Newton intuitionally says, nature is a perfect circulatory worker, generating fluids out of solids, fixed things out of a volatile, and volatile out of fixed, subtle out of gross, and gross out of subtle. Thus, perhaps, may all things be originated from ether. Let's continue on here. You hear that? There's some interesting concepts being laid down here, but let's continue on. It is interesting to notice in this connection that Newton was familiar with the writings of Jacob Bowman, the Teutonic theosopher, and that among Newton's posthumous papers were found copious notes and translations from his works. As to the races referred to in the above quotation, it need only be said in passing that the secret doctrine declares that in the evolution of humanity there are to be 7 races, of which ours is now the 5th, and that each race makes 7 rounds on our planetary chain, of which rounds the present race is now in the 4th, with here and there a 5th rounder appearing. The secret doctrine teaches not only the immortality of the soul, but the perfectibility of humanity by orderly evolution on this earth. This doctrine concerns the general evolution, which the present work touches only incidentally. It is complicated and necessarily so. Gonna pause there, folks. And you thought Charles Darwin came up with the idea of evolution, didn't you? Nope. This is the secret doctrine going way back, okay? They're claiming that there's going to be 7 different races of man, that we are currently the 4th race, and that the 5th race is coming about of man, okay? Do you hear what the kind of stuff they're spouting here? So, this is a kind of an allusion to the idea of transhumanism. Okay, let's put it that way. They're touching upon the idea of transhumanism, and it says that the secret doctrine teaches not only the immortality of the soul, but the perfectibility of humanity by orderly evolution on this earth. You hear that? Perfectibility of humanity by orderly evolution on this earth. They're describing verbatim transhumanism right there. That's what the whole goal is. And you thought that was a new idea, didn't you? Well, lo and behold, there's nothing new under the sun, is there? This has been a long time coming. They've been planning it a long time. They finally have the technology in the right place where they think they could pull it off. And that's what they're trying to do. And, it's pretty complicated, as he says here, and necessarily so. But let's continue on with the reading. I don't want to get too hung up on 1 or 2 things like that. There are 3 fundamental propositions that underlie the secret doctrine. A, an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle on which all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. It is beyond the range and reach of human thought, in the words of Mandakya, unthinkable and unspeakable. This infinite and eternal cause, and the eternal cause is in capital letters, and also, like I was saying before, omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle. That's all in capital letters, too. So it says, this infinite and eternal cause, dimly formulated in the unconscious and unknowable of current European philosophy, is the rootless root of all that was, is, or ever shall be. Okay, gonna pause right there. Do you know what they're talking about here, folks? The Masons believe that there's not really a quote-unquote creator God as an actual physical being or an intelligent being that is similar to humans or that were made in his image. They believe in an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle. See, it's an archetype. It's the infinite and eternal cause, the rootless root. They believe in the Force. To make it very simple for you, think of Star Wars, the Force. That's what they're talking about here. That's what they believe, the Force. It's not really a being per se. It's not really an intelligence per se. It's a force. It's an immutable, boundless, eternal, omnipresent principle. It's a dimly formulated in the unconscious and unknowable of philosophy. Let's continue reading here. In Sanskrit, it is Sat. This Bennis is symbolized in the secret doctrine under two aspects. On the one hand, absolute abstract space representing bare subjectivity, the one thing which no human mind can either exclude from any conception or conceive of by itself. You hear that? It's talking about the reification of the idea of space again. Space doesn't really objectively exist anywhere, and it's not something that we could imagine by itself, okay? It also can we could not, in our mind, either exclude it from any concept or conceive it by itself, see? So this kind of creates a kind of dichotomy in the mind, this idea of space, and you see how they're relating back to it here again. You see, space, the Force, Star Wars. Are you getting the idea yet? Like what exactly they're trying to communicate to us and what they're trying to make us believe? Let's get back to what the reading says here. On the other, absolute abstract, motion representing unconditioned consciousness, spirit or consciousness, and matter are, however, to be regarded not as independent realities, but as the two facets or aspects of the absolute, which constitutes the basis of conditioned being, whether subjective or objective. Considering this metaphysical triad, the only reality, spirit and matter, as the root from which proceeds all manifestation, the great breath assumes the character of pre-cosmic ideation. And he refers here in parentheses to Plato's world of divine ideas. So you see here, unconditioned consciousness, okay? The absolute abstract motion representing unconditioned consciousness, spirit or consciousness, and matter are, however, to be regarded not as independent realities, but as the two facets or aspects of the absolute. So you see, spirit and matter combined together are the absolute. This is the core of being. Here's your Trinity idea once again. The great breath assumes the character of pre-cosmic ideation, okay? Let's continue on with what it says. It is the fons et origo of force and of all individual consciousness, and supplies the guiding intelligence in the vast scheme of cosmic evolution. On the other hand, pre-cosmic root substance, mula prakriti, in parentheses it says there, is that aspect of the absolute which underlies all the objective planes in nature. So see, it's calling this force idea the root substance which underlies all of the objective planes in nature. Then let's go on. Okay, part B. That's the end of part A. That was a lot in part A, wasn't it? It says, the second of the three postulates of the secret doctrine is the eternity of the universe in toto as a boundless plane, periodically the playground of numberless universes incessantly manifesting and disappearing, called the manifesting stars and the sparks of eternity, the eternity of the pilgrim. The monad, or self, in man, is like a wink of the eye of self-existence. The appearance and disappearance of worlds is like a regular tidal ebb and flux and reflux. The third postulate is this. Let's move on here. The fundamental identity, and this is part C now, the fundamental identity of all souls with the universal oversoul, the latter being itself an aspect of the unknown root, and the obligatory pilgrimage for every soul, a spark of the former, through the cycle of incarnation, or necessity, it says in parentheses, in accordance with cyclic and karmic law during the whole term. The pivotal doctrine of the Eastern philosophy admits no privileges or special gifts in man, save those won by his own ego, through personal effort and merit throughout a long series of metempsychosis and reincarnations. Let's continue on here. Every soul must, in quotation marks here it says, work out its own salvation, and also in quotation marks, take the kingdom of heaven by force. Salvation by faith and the vicarious atonement were not taught as now interpreted by Jesus, nor are these doctrines taught in the exoteric scriptures. They are later and ignorant perversions of the original doctrines. In the early church, as in the secret doctrine, there was not one Christ for the whole world, but a potential Christ in every man. Theologians first made a fetish of the impersonal, omnipresent divinity, and then tore the Christos from the hearts of all humanity in order to deify Jesus, that they might have a God-man peculiarly their own. And I'm going to pause right here. This is where this doctrine is at odds with the bulk of Christianity. You see, they believe that Christianity is a perversion of the ancient mysteries, and that this is what the ancient mysteries taught. And I would argue that, see, it says here, every soul must work out its own salvation and take the kingdom of heaven by force. That goes contrary to what I personally know of God. A loving God would not leave man abandoned on his own. This is a concept known as deism right here, okay? That God created everything, or this force, so they say, that they claim is, what God really is, created everything and left it on its own to develop on its own. And that it's our place to go ahead and master use of this place and become gods in our own right. And see, this is where it goes into a kind of contradiction of how things really are in this reality, okay? And this is kind of a dangerous thing that they're talking here. This is actually, when it comes down to it, humanism, secular humanism that they're teaching, that man is all that there is, and that he can become God, and he will be God. He's the master of all. This is a very arrogant place to stand, okay? We can see through numerous examples in not only the Bible, but other religious works too, where this kind of hubris, man standing in the face of the gods and claiming to be God themselves, or trying to take God's place, it never ends well. And that's the whole thing here. As much as we would like to be, a creation can never be greater than its creator. Okay? And all of nature's a creation. We're created beings. So we cannot ever hope to be God, per se. And that's what these people teach and what they want. They think they could be God. They think that they're gods in the making. And that kind of flies in the face of the nature of reality. It flies in the face of nature. You can see what they're doing. They're totally inverting the natural order here and trying to create a completely artificial thing here, a completely artificial system. They're trying to modify mankind. They're trying to change mankind. They think they could do a better job. They don't even understand how it all works. Do you see the hubris here? Do you see the problem with that? They don't understand the basics of how this world or this universe really works. but they claim to, and they've made up all these fake systems and artificial sciences and stuff and scientific ideas to try to quantify how it works, and in their hubris, they think they could do a better job when they don't even really understand what it is or how it works. So it's kind of fallacy to claim that you could beat God, and that's exactly what they're doing here. And as we read on, you'll see what I'm talking about. And this flies in the face of what the fundamental personality traits and stuff and the fundamental characteristics that I know to be true of God. It flies in the face of that. This is not, who God is or what God is. He's not a heartless, uncaring being or a heartless, uncaring force that has manifested all things and then walks away from it. He's a personal God when it comes down to it. He cares very much about his creation. He's not just some force that just all of a sudden appeared out of nowhere and created everything. You could see how this could get kind of difficult for a lot of people to read through a lot of this stuff, because it questions the nature of what people's belief systems and stuff are. But as we go on, you'll begin to see the fallacy in the thought process that they put forward here. Okay, they do, weave in a lot of really good, true, factual things, and a lot of really interesting and somewhat true concepts. But at the end of the day, what they're doing here is they're kind of negating what God's will is here. Okay, they're trying to negate what God's will is. You see, God sent Christ to this earth to be the way of salvation for everybody, not just the illumined, adepts and initiates of these secret orders, okay? That's not how it works. That's not what God intended. God wanted all of his children to have these potentials, to have this salvation. So that's why he sent Christ to earth to fulfill that and to actually be that salvation for everyone without having to go through all this ridiculous initiation process and all of this stuff. See, that's the thing. It says clearly in the Bible that it's a gift from God, a free gift given from God, not of works, lest any man should boast. So it's not something, you don't get salvation through good works or through knowledge or gnosis. There's nothing wrong with learning things, okay, folks? There's nothing wrong with reading this stuff and thinking very deeply on it. But at the end of the day, it's not going to get you salvation, and that's where the trick is at here, okay? That's where the deception comes in. They strive, thinking that they're going to achieve this salvation. They're going to achieve godhood. They're going to transcend all of this and become God, when that's a lie, born in the pits of hell, okay? It's a deception. You cannot attain godhood. You're not going to become God, but you can accept salvation from God and come to this point of reunification back with the Spirit of God, because that's kind of what it's all about, okay? But you're not going to achieve that through works, through constant cycles, over and over and over again here in this place, in this plane. And, just by learning these quote-unquote secret doctrines, you're not going to achieve that. There's nothing wrong with learning stuff and trying to find out this stuff and seeking out knowledge. But at the end of the day, that's not going to buy you your salvation. Salvation was given as a free gift, and that was the whole purpose why God sent his human counterpart here. He sent his Spirit in the flesh here on earth so that he could show the way for people to salvation, and it's just through acceptance of this free gift from God. It's not through any kinds of works or any kinds of secret knowledge or secret learning or going through these initiatory orders and trying to achieve all this power, when all that's involved in these secret societies is controlling people. That's what it's about. It's about controlling people. It's not about freedom. It's not about truth. It's about controlling people, and it's about leading people down a wrong path and always dangling that next carrot in front of them to keep them trotting on this path to do what you want. And that's the highest secret at the top of all of this. So anyway, let's just go on with what the author says here in this book. So we left off. Let's see. Right here. All the ancient mysteries had the true doctrine, and the early Christians had it. Masonry, uncontaminated by the disciples of Loyola, had and has it also. Gonna pause there again. The disciples of Loyola. You see what they're doing? They're shifting the blame to the Jesuits here now, okay? They're saying that Masonry is uncontaminated by this idea of, the early Christians, how they twisted their secret doctrine around. The Masons have always maintained this secret doctrine, but it's those disciples of Loyola, those Jesuits, that messed it up. You hear that? They're the same group at the topmost levels, folks. There's a big secret right there. The Jesuits and the Masons. At the topmost levels, it's the same people in both organizations. Okay? Keep that in mind. But you see how they create this division? It's a false dichotomy. It's the old Hegelian dialectic again. It's the control system. So they could blame this other secret society, and this leads to power struggles between these different secret society groups. And we could see that going on. They're always shifting power back and forth. They all kind of work together at certain points, but at the end of the day, it's just a couple select people that really want power, and they fight over power. So it's just their nature. Let's get back to the reading, though. The one immutable principle referred to in the first proposition, A, is called in the Kabbalah Ein Sof, the word Ein meaning nothing. This is not Jehovah or Adonai or the great architect of the universe, for it is not itself creative, but the cause of creation, the causeless cause. In parentheses it says there, in all capital letters. The causeless cause. See, folks, it's the force. I'm telling you, that's what these people believe. They believe the force is the thing that caused all of creation. It's not the great architect of the universe. You see the distinction there? Okay? We'll learn who the great architect of the universe is in a couple minutes here, okay? But the great architect of the universe that the Masons revere is not the creator, okay? Because they believe that the creator is this quote-unquote causeless cause of creation, okay? It's the force. They believe the force is the creator, and the great architect of the universe is somebody different. Keep that in mind. So let's read on. The Jewish creators, plural, are the Elohim, the principalities and powers. See that? Let's pause right there. You know those principalities and powers that the Bible speaks about, folks? They're telling you here that those principalities and powers are the quote-unquote Elohim, okay? That they're the creators, and the Jewish creators. Let's read on, though. In this conception of divinity lies the secret of the ineffable name, i.e. the nameless. The lost word is to the master who possesses it and knows how to pronounce it what the logos or creative power is to the nameless. Hence, the real master creates, and in this sense is a god. Pausing right there. What did I tell you, folks? What did I tell you? Let's get back to the reading. This will be further shown in connection with the 7 principles and the nature of man. The second proposition, the eternity of the universe in toto, reveals the law of cycles and the incessant work of creation. In other words, the creative process never had a beginning and will never have an end. There is one endless succession of universes, worlds, and solar systems that continually appear and disappear. Each sun, star, or solar system has a period of activity and a period of repose, emanates from and is drawn back into the all and the one. These periods are called the nights and days of Brahm, and that's capital B-R-A-H-M. The idea that a God with human qualities and human passions made the earth out of nothing in 6 days of 24 hours each is sufficiently miraculous and sufficiently childish for those who are ready to burn all who do not accept their interpretation. And I'm going to pause right there, folks. Okay? Do you hear what they're saying there? I'm going to read that once again for you so you could hear the hubris out of the mouths of these people and see what it is that they believe at the topmost levels of these secret societies. The idea that a God with human qualities and human passions made the earth out of nothing in 6 days of 24 hours each is sufficiently miraculous and sufficiently childish for those who are ready to burn all who do not accept their interpretation. Let's continue on, because the next couple statements are pretty telling too. Back to the reading. To endow a God with the power of performing the impossible and the inconceivable was considered sufficient honor bestowed. The law of periodicity is a necessary corollary of the order of events and the flight of time. Rhythmical, orderly, harmonious movements in space give us our conception of time as how fast, how often, how slow, how regular, etc. The ear is a time organ, and the basic property of the ether is sound. Gonna pause right there, folks. That's an important idea, and it's also a truth. The ear is our time organ, and the basic property of the ether is sound. Remember that, because actually, light operates in much a similar way as sound. As sound is the vibration or the movement, the agitation of air, light is the agitation of the ether in the same way. They work exactly the same. Okay, that's another secret that they teach here, but that's also a fundamental truth. Let's get back. I don't want to get hung up on that. That's not what we're reading really primarily about tonight. But they, like I said, they do throw some really good, true ideas and stuff in here too. But let's get back to it. This idea of periodicity or law of cycles is symbolized in Freemasonry in many ways. In the 3, 5, or 7 years of pilgrimage or penance, in the 7 years of plenty and 7 of famine, in the low 12 and the high 12, in calling the craft from labor to refreshment, and many others. In the third postulate, we have the fundamental identity of all souls with the One, which gives the basis of the eternal and universal brotherhood of man, and the basis of the entire scheme of human evolution. When these doctrines are clearly understood, they will be seen to go far beyond any modern scheme of evolution, though running on somewhat similar lines. In them, the entire scheme of cosmic and human evolution will be found to have been worked out ages ago. They're telling you something true there again, folks. The ancients knew a lot of these ideas, and we're just rediscovering them today because much of our history and our science of the ancients has been obfuscated or destroyed, and particularly in the time of Constantine, as it says here. Anyway, back to the reading. Pythagoras and Plato found these doctrines completely unfolded in the mysteries. Brother Pike, and referring to Albert Pike here, says repeatedly that they have been far oftener disfigured than apprehended and never transcended in modern times. Masonry derives its genius, its inspiration, its glyphs, and its traditions from this philosophy as taught in the mysteries. How short-sighted and time-serving, then, must it be for Masonry to allow its grand traditions, its priceless inheritance, to be dwarfed and overlaid by illogical interpretations derived from records that were in the beginning, and before being disfigured by ignorance or cupidity, only an allegory of the true doctrines prepared by those who know. And it says that in quotation marks. Those who knew. For the ignorant masses who demanded a sign and could never rise above a fetish. This is like bartering a magnificent diamond for a lump of common clay. Shall Masons now complete the folly by trying to convince themselves and others that the clay is the only diamond? How much one's idea of God colors all his thoughts and deeds is seldom realized. The ordinary crude and ignorant conception of a personal God more often results in slavish fear on the one hand and atheism on the other. It is what Carlyle calls an absentee God, doing nothing since the 6 days of creation, but sitting on the outside and seeing it go. This idea of God carries with it, of course, the idea of creation as something already completed in time, when the fact is that creation is a process without beginning or end. The world, all worlds, are being created today as much as at any period in the past. Even the apparent destruction of worlds is a creative or evolutionary process. Gonna pause there, folks. A lot of big ideas here, you see. They don't believe in a personal God. They don't believe you could have a relationship with God. They don't believe that you could know God or that God will answer your prayers or anything like that. You hear that? They see the idea of a thought of a personal God like that as something that results in either slavish fear to that God or atheism, on the other hand. And they actually go so far as to call him an absentee God, doing nothing since the 6 days of creation, and sitting on the outside and seeing it go, when that contradicts everything I personally know about who and what God is. So, I mean, that this is what they teach. This is the idea of deism, okay? And this was a popular philosophy going back a couple hundred years here now, and that's the whole thing. They didn't believe in a God that was kind of a hands-on God that actually does things here in his creation. And it does go on to state here that the idea of creation as something already completed in time, when the fact is that creation is a process without beginning or end. See that? The fact that creation is a process without beginning or end speaks actually to the nature that God is with us here. Okay, and he's always ever present here and cares very much about his creation because it's an ongoing process. See, that's the thing. So they contradict themselves with this point, saying that, this God that they speak of being an impersonal and uncaring God, but then they also claim that the thought of a caring personal God that is with us always is a quote-unquote childish idea. And do you see the contradiction here? But they also think that they themselves can be God or are going to become God, or that they are gods here, or that they'll evolve to be gods. Do you see the disconnect, the logical disconnect? Anyway, let's go back to the reading. The world, all worlds are being created today as much as at any period in the past. Even the apparent destruction of worlds is a creative or evolutionary process. Gonna pause there. They love destruction, don't they, folks? The destruction. See, that's an important idea here, too. Let's get back to the reading, though. Emanating from the bosom of the all and running their cyclic course, day alternating with night on the outer physical plane, they are again indrawn to the invisible plane, only to re-emerge after a longer night and start again on a higher cycle of evolution. Theologians have tried in vain to attach the idea of immanence to that of personality and ended in a jargon of words and utter confusion of ideas. A personal absolute is not, except in potency. God does not think, but is the cause of thought. God does not love. He is love, in the perfect or absolute sense, and so with all the divine attributes. God is thus the concealed logos, the causeless cause, the rootless root. God never manifests himself to be seen of men. You see, I'm going to pause right there. God did manifest himself to show to man that he exists, and these people rejected him. Okay? And that these divine attributes that they say, God is the manifestation of them. Okay? He absolutely is. So to say that God does not think, but he is the cause of thought, and that God does not love, he is love in the perfect or absolute sense. See, God, not only is he love, and does he cause thought, but he also is that. So it's saying God does not think, God does think, but God is the cause of thought. And see, it's both, but they've cut themselves off from the idea here. You see, they rejected it. So anyway, it says here, let's go back to what they say. They say, God is thus the concealed logos, the causeless cause, the rootless root. God never manifests himself to be seen of men. Creation is his manifestation, and as creation is not complete and never will be, and is as it never had a beginning, there is a concealed or unrevealed potency back of and beyond all creation, which is still God. Now, space is the most perfect symbol of the idea of divinity, for it enters into all our concepts and is the basis of all our experiences. We cannot fathom it, or define it, or exclude it from a single thought or experience. Space is boundless, infinite, unfathomable, unknowable, in all, over all, through all. We know that it is, and that is all we know about it. And they say they have the word it and is capitalized here, folks. Do you see the allusion to the idea of the I am in the Bible? They're saying it is. They're saying God is not an actual being. Okay, they're saying God is this force, this thing, this impersonal thing that doesn't have these traits that we associate with him, the love and the wisdom. See, they equate it to a force. That's what they believe. Okay, let's continue on with the reading. Excuse me. But are not these just the attributes that are assigned to the absolute and infinite deity? And they are all negations? God says the Kabbalah is no thing. But the theologian will hasten to say that this is pure pantheism. It is no more pantheism than it is atheism, for, as already shown, the Ein Sof is before and beyond creation or cosmos. It is not God deduced or derived from nature, but precisely the reverse. Nature derived from God, and yet God remains the same yesterday, today, and forever, the changeless. The stability of nature is derived from the unchangeableness of God. God never tires, is not exhausted at his work, needing rest. That were so human as to be childish, and the idea perhaps originated from the cyclic law found in the Kabbalah of the days and nights of Brahm, the Manvantaras and Pralayas, or periods of outbreathing and of inbreathing in the cycles of evolution. I'm going to pause there again. Do you see what they're saying? They're saying that these things that they said about the stability of God being unchangeable, and that God never tires, is not exhausted at his work, needing rest, that we're so human as to be childish. See, they think of Christianity in particular and any other religious idea as childish. See, they think that their quote-unquote secret doctrine, their acceptance of this universal force, is the fruition of these childish things. This is growing up into, something else. That's what they believe, and they believe that, this advent of transhumanism is the ultimate expression of that idea, that that man can become God, and that in his becoming God, he's growing up out of these childish ideas of religion, that there's a God. Do you see that? Anyway, let's get back to the reading here. We're almost done. Stick with me a few more minutes, folks. Hence the parable given to the ignorant or the profane of God's working and then resting. If the reader will but reflect a moment on his own process of breathing, he will find that the inbreathing, inhalation, and the outbreathing, exhalation, are equal and equally active processes, although so different, each being the opposite of the other, each in its turn the cause of the other. Stop one, and the other ceases also. The more one reflects on this symbol of the great breath, which creation is, the more will he understand of both eternal nature and his own being. But it may be asked, is man to be deprived of all idea of personality except his own? By no means. God is the author of being and is the author of personality. He personifies himself, i.e., expresses that potency of himself which personality is through man. The hand of providence is always a human hand. Humanity is both the vehicle and the agent of what man has called the providence of God. Humanity in toto, then, is the only personal God, and Christos is the realization or perfection of this divine persona in individual conscious experience. When this perfection is realized, the state is called Christos, which the Greeks and Buddha with the Hindus. Hence the Christ is at one with the Father. Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Humanity in toto, what is it? Is it the generations of the present age, or of any age in the past, or of the future, and these alone? Justice rules the universe and is the foundation of all law. Justice is the kingdom, the permanency of deity. Humanity, therefore, means every human being ever born in any age or to be born in coming ages on this planet. All are in the hollow of his hand. One God, one law for all, else there is no justice. And if it shall be done unto each according to the deeds done in the body, if as a man soweth, so shall he reap. The only logical deduction is law governing action and determining results according to absolute justice. And this, the Kabbalah, the secret doctrine, and Masonry, and all sacred books and all religions everywhere teach. By taking the symbols for the thing symbolized, men have made contradictions out of details and then built up a system of final rewards and punishments attaching to acts in time, and claimed their unreason and injustice as binding to all eternity. The result is atheism and materialism, for there is an instinct in man as part of his divine inheritance, and that instinct is an innate sense of justice. Destroy this, and the result is atheism, pure and simple. Destruction of the sense of justice has honeycombed the churches and been the parent of modern materialism. It is true that materialism is not the logical but the actual result. The issue is not logically between an unjust God and no God, but between a God that is inconceivable because unjust, and a God that is conceivable because just, and therefore the issue is the issue of the supreme reason. But this philosophical concept of divinity has another still wider bearing. It concerns not only man's personal life, but determines his relations to his fellow man. It is the basis of ethics and his knowledge. It is the basis of ethics, and furthermore coordinates all his experience and all his knowledge, and this leads to true wisdom. To know God is the supreme wisdom. It will be urged by modern theologians that this view dethrones Christ. To this objection, the answer is that any other view orphans humanity. It is far more important that men should strive to become Christs than that they should believe that Jesus was Christ. If the Christ state can be attained by but one human being during the whole evolution of the race, then the evolution of man is a farce, and human perfection an impossibility. And I'm going to pause right there, folks. See what they're saying here? It is far more important that men should strive to become Christs than that they should believe that Jesus was Christ. If the Christ state can be attained by but one human being during the whole evolution of the race, then the evolution of man is a farce, and human perfection an impossibility. Well, I got news for them. Evolution of man is a farce, folks. Isn't it? Anyway, and human perfection, it's not possible on the physical plane here. Anyway, that's my aside. Let's get back to the reading. We're almost done. Says Jesus is no less divine because all men may reach the same divine perfection. Again, it will be urged, there is no other name given under heaven or amongst men whereby ye can be saved. But this is the ineffable name which every master is to possess and become, and salvation and perfection are synonymous. It has also been shown that every act in the drama of the life of Jesus and every quality assigned to Christ is to be found in the life of Krishna and in the legend of all the sun gods from the remotest antiquity. I'm going to pause there, folks. No, their stories are not the same, even though you hear from multiple sources all the time. Most particularly that, what was that movie that came out not too many years ago? I can't think of what it's called right now. But, you see, that's a theosophical idea right there. They've taken some of these different ancient gods and legends and stories of them, and they've tried to correlate them to the story of Christ, and they've assigned different attributes to them that weren't there in the original stories. So it's not exactly the same, but anyway, that's their viewpoint. Let's continue on. That which the Orthodox Christian will find to oppose to this view is not that it dethrones or degrades Christ, but that it disproves the idea of Christ as their executive possession and denies that all other religions are less divine than their own. We have brought the same selfishness into our religions that we indulge in regard to our other possessions, such as wife and children, houses, land, country, and the same partisan spirit as in our politics. And this, more than anything else, appears to justify selfishness in general, militates against the brotherhood of man, and prevents the founding of the great republic, composed of many nations and all people. The idea of universal brotherhood, which was a cardinal doctrine in the ancient mysteries, as it involved in the first postulate of the secret doctrine and openly declared in the third, and which is equally given the very first rank in Masonry, is the logical deduction from our idea of divinity and the essential nature and meaning of Christos. Humanity in toto, as already explained, is the personification of the divine in creation, and the idea of exact and universal justice regards each individual of all myriads constituting humanity with equal favor. There are no favorites in the divine conception. Justice of God toward all implies justice toward each other amongst men. The principle of justice is law universal, and the principle of brotherhood and of the perfectibility of man's nature through evolution necessitate reincarnation. The number of souls constituting humanity, though practically innumerable, is nevertheless definite. Hence, the doctrine of pre-existence taught in all the mysteries applies to every child of woman born, all conditions in each life being determined by previous living. This will be further elaborated in another section of this work. Thus, the fatherhood of God in the personification of divinity in humanity includes the universal and unqualified brotherhood of man. The real masters in all ages, knowing this from the lessons taught in the mysteries of initiation, have ever been the foes of autocrats, oligarchs, and oppression in every form, whether ecclesiastical or political. Masons are taught to obey the laws of the country in which they reside. They are not agents of revolution, but of evolution. You hear that, folks? By enlightenment and persuasion, they may strive to reform a nation or a church. The true republic is the outgrowth of brotherhood, and a jealous monarch in church or state will naturally oppose the diffusion of doctrines that tend to the liberation and the enlightenment of the people. It is true, however, that all the masters or adepts may not be equally enlightened or equally prudent. Mystics like Jacob Bowman, or adepts like Saint Germain, or Masons like De Molay, or philosophers like Bruno, or other agents of the Great Lodge, sought only to instruct and enlighten mankind. The rabble were deaf to their doctrines and appeals, and turned like ravenous wolves upon them, because true Masonry, unemasculated, bore the banners of freedom and equal right, and was in rebellion against spiritual tyranny. Its lodges were proscribed in 1738 by edict of the States of Holland. In 1737, Louis XV forbade them in France. In 1738, Pope Clement XII issued against them his famous bull of excommunication, which was renewed by Benedict XIV, and in 1743, the Council of Bern also proscribed them. Masonry has ever the most vivid remembrance of the terrible and artificial torments that were used to put down new forms of religion or extinguish the old. It sees with the eye of memory the ruthless extermination of all people of all ages and both sexes, because it was their misfortune not to know the God of the Hebrews, or to worship him under the wrong name, by the savage troops of Moses and Joshua. It sees the thumbscrews and the racks, the whip, the gallows, and the stake, the victims of Diocletian and Alva, the miserable Covenanters, the nonconformists Servetus burned, and the unoffending Quaker hung. It sees the persecutions of Peter and Paul, the martyrdom of Stephen, the trials of Ignatius, Polycarp, Justin, and Irenaeus, and then, in turn, the sufferings of wretched pagans under the Christian emperors, as of papists in Ireland under Elizabeth, and the bloated Henry, the Roman Virgin naked before the hungry lions, young Margaret Graham tied to a stake at low water mark, and there left to drown, singing hymns to God until the savage waters broke over her head, and all that in all ages have suffered by hunger and nakedness, peril and prison, the rack, the stake, the sword. It sees them all, and shudders at the long roll of human atrocities, and it sees the oppression still practiced in the name of religion, men shot in a Christian jail in Christian Italy for reading the Christian Bible, in almost every Christian state, laws forbidding freedom of speech on matters relating to Christianity, and the gallows reaching its arm over the pulpit. The fires of Moloch in Syria, the harsh mutilations in the name of Astarte, Cybele, and Jehovah, the barbarities of imperial pagan torturers, the still grosser torments which Roman Gothic Christians in Italy and Spain heaped on their brother men, the fiendish cruelties to which Switzerland and France and Netherlands, England, Scotland, Ireland, America have been witness, are none too powerful to warn man of the unspeakable evils which follow from mistakes and errors in the matter of religion, and especially from investing the God of love with the cruel and vindictive passions of erring humanity, and making blood to have a sweet savor in his nostrils, and groans of agony to be delicious in his ears. Man never had the right to usurp the unexercised prerogative of God and condemn and punish another for his belief. All men are brothers by all the laws of nature and by the very being of God, but so long as religion defines heresy as a crime or imagines a God with human attributes, man's inhumanity to man will continue to make countless millions mourn, and find vent for all evil passions justified by their idea of God. But some will say this is all a thing of the past. Mankind, especially in Christian countries, have outgrown these relics of barbarism. Alas, if it were only true, we do not drown or burn or torture physically, but quite as subtle torture to the sensitive is found in scorn, contempt, ridicule, and ostracism, in slander and defamation of character. Are we any nearer genuine brotherhood today than we were a century ago? Or have we been refined our cruelties and merely disguised the claw of the tiger? Do not supreme selfishness and relentless greed lie at the heart of competition? Are not the trade unions and the syndicates glowering at each other like cages of wild beasts? Ah, my brother, we are but little removed from barbarism after all, and it does make all the difference in the world what idea we entertain of God and what is our basis of ethics. The one idea of the modern scheme of salvation is self-preservation. We must be saved if all the rest are damned, and competition and egotism and selfishness in every form are the legitimate result. See, I'm going to pause right there, folks. They're saying that this idea of salvation through Christ is a selfish thing, and it's all, bent on selfishness, egotism, and that kind of thing. I would argue with that position, but anyway, let's continue on with what they say here. Masonry does not preach a new religion, but reiterates the new commandment announced by Jesus. You see how they twist words here, folks? First of all, they spend a whole lot of portion of this chapter downgrading Christ and Christianity, and then they turn around and they try to, make themselves sound legitimate by utilizing it. Masonry does not preach a new religion, but it reiterates the new commandment announced by Jesus, which was also announced by every great reformer of religion since history began. Drop the theological barnacles from the religion of Jesus, as taught by him and by the Essenes and Gnostics of the first centuries, and it becomes Masonry. Masonry, in its purity, derived as it is from the old Hebrew Kabbalah as part of the great universal wisdom religion of remotest antiquity, stands squarely for the unqualified and universal brotherhood of man. In all time and in every age, to Christianize Masonry, or to narrow it to the sectarian bounds of any creed, is not only to dwarf and belittle it, but must inevitably result, as among warring sects has always resulted with religions, in setting brother against brother and lodge against lodge, and result in final dissolution. This is one of the plainest meanings of the legend of the lost word. The thinnest veil over the sublime mystery of the ineffable name is brotherhood and love. This is the light of the Logos. The gross darkness that hangs like a black veil over the Shekinah is selfishness and hate. Even so hath it ever been, and so will it ever be, till brotherly love, relief, and truth reign universally in the hearts of all humanity. The refinements of so-called civilization do not change the essential nature of man. Beneath all these there sleeps or wakes a demon or an angel, and one of these is ever in chains, for no man can serve two masters. And that's the end of the chapter there, folks. But do you see how they convolute different ideas with other different ideas and try to twist them around to this viewpoint? But you could see how they regard Christianity in particular with this type of, scorn. Do you see that? They claim it's childish to believe in a caring, personal, loving God that exists here with you now and, could answer your prayers and comfort you. They say that's childish and that, God is not an actual being or a creator being. It's a force, you see, that causes all these things to happen. So, do you understand how they've depersonalized the idea of God? Therefore, when you depersonalize the idea of God, that kind of creates a division in ethical thinking. This once again falls back to an idea of secular humanism, which is also something that we call moral relativism. Okay, so this opens up the possibility of moral relativism where there's no absolute standard of right or wrong. And you could see how they use their flowery words and try to twist and maneuver all of these different ideas together to make it sound as if it's legitimate. But when it comes down to it, what they teach is that man is going to be God. He's becoming God. It's his place to do so. He has the right to rule, to become God, to be divine. And that also, whatever he does is okay, because there's no absolute standard of right or wrong, because there's not a divine creator being that created everything and has loving intention for everybody and wants only good for his creation. Okay? They've hidden God from us. That's what this is about. That's why they created the farce that is space. Okay? We read it right here. Space is there to hide God. That's what they've utilized the concept for, to hide the nature of God. And you see, then they believe they've depersonalized, taken away all the spirit from God by equating God to nothing but a force. And that couldn't be further from the truth, folks. So, anyway, that's the reading for tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out with me for a good long time here. This was a long reading. And like and subscribe. Have a good night, folks.